how was your workshop though? How was your curatorial workshop? Were you?
No, it was as any intensive workshop goes.
Are you a curator now?
I can be. It's hell and heaven at the same time. But like I didn't win the quote unquote research grant plus curatory job that you will get if you get selected. But I got recognition and like a honorable mention, especially from the head curator. She was the one who was actually defending me during their deliberations. And the interpreter just said that, well, it's Japan Foundation, so need for interpreters. The interpreter just told me that what pretty much didn't get me through was my lack of experience with curation. I was like, I don't mind. I got her respect. And she was telling me like, one of the things that the head curator said about me was that in her 45 years, she has never seen anyone that passionate about photography. So it was like, points.
Yeah.
That's my thing, man. That's my thing. Pictures. And I got to connect with like other curators. It was weird at first because I don't understand because how some are very advanced, so they're playing with post curatorial concepts already or para curatorial concepts, which is like at first I didn't understand what the hell those mean. But then, like, oh, that's what it means. Post-curatorial, para-curatorial. Like, questioning the relevance of curator when it comes to projects and whatnot.
Oh,
which,
yeah.
So their projects, question the fact, is there a need for a curator or the curator's role in the entire process of staging an exhibition? It's interesting.
But
at least the two... Well, for me, not really interesting. It's just that it's way beyond what I know as of the moment. And they were really happy because what?
I was just gonna say that's really like that's really contemporary philosophy where it's all about like navel gazing, like questioning the role of everything that you do and everything that you are in your own profession. I don't know, and trying to make that come out in the piece. Yeah, I can't express my thoughts. Words. Midnight.
But thing is there a need for thoughts? So it's gonna be a post-thought era. No, I'm just, it's still something beyond me. And and the thing is, during my first proposal, there were so many problems with it. So what I did was just revise the entire thing. Not even a revision. I mean, I overhauled and started and presented the new proposal. And I did that in a span of like 3 days. We're given 3 weeks to prepare for our first proposal. And then for the revision, that's why they're just calling it revisor proposals. But I did an entirely new one in how many hours? In a day. Probably in 16 hours.
So you mean to tell me like your last 3 weeks of hell? You mean to tell me like your last 3 weeks of hell were for nothing really? Because like you could have done it in 3 days?
Well,
how many times could you have taken your netbook to the shop?
Well, the thing is, day one I learned a whole lot of new things. So, there's that. Like, oh, so that's how I'm supposed to do it. Oh, so the observer is not a general. Oh, it's about observation.
What's about observation?
Curation. It has more to do with observation than actually, like, commanding people or telling people what to do. It's more about observation. Like, a curator has to be responsive to the things that are happening either economically, society, sociologically, or in art and how, or with the artists and what they're doing, and see if the artists respond to these observations, or you can make the artists respond. And that observation is pretty much your exhibition or your book or whatever, the form of the curatorial project. So, and I also had to like questions before that I had no idea what it means. Like before, I didn't know what the hell they were saying about have a what is your curatorial problem? I'm like, what? The curatorial problem is pretty much your thesis statement. That's it. what is that observation that you had prior, or as the Japanese curators call it, what is that urgency that you see?
Okay, so
that's your curatorial problem, and how are you going to respond to that problem through the exhibition? So
given that you have this idea of the curatorial problem, and this is like a substantive thing, right? This is like a question that the curator is putting to the general audience. How do you like balance that with the agency of the artist then? Like the artist's vision vis-a-vis the curator's vision? Or are the artists always at the behest of the curators?
That's why one of the Japanese curators were pointing to that. That's the tricky situation with working with artists. If they already have an accomplished body of work and they agree and respond to your curatorial problem that you presented to them, or your proposal, of course, that say you're compiling a work about dissent and using, what do you call this? Rebellious, not rebellious. What's the term I'm going to use? Activist aesthetics or visual art forms. So you approach someone who makes the murals and you ask him, can I use your existing work before? Or are you willing to do existing work? So whether or not the artist will say yes or no is up to the artist, of course. And the work he produced will be under your scrutiny. Even if you don't like the work, of course, you're not going to include it. So those are the tricky things. You have to make sure that the artist you select can either be guided towards your curatorial problem when you assign them or commission them for work, or their style really lends to how you want your curatorial problem to be addressed.
Oh, isn't that sort of insulting to artists though? Because that sort of undercuts like the vision of an artist.
No, but when you compile the entire set or series, the expression of the artist has to come out.
But then it's still within
curatorial is not about the curator. It has to be in the realm of the curatorial problem. This is the case for most of our examples during the workshop was about group exhibits or group exhibitions.
Okay.
But if, say, you are going to have an exhibition of a certain artist's work, of course, it has to be about your curatorial problem is about the work of that artist and what that artist's urgencies or observations are with regard to the curatorial problem or with regard to what he is or a person. Say, if I'm going to curate a bunch of, give me an artist, preferably a photographer. Say Ansel Adams' work.
All right, we went there.
Because he's a famous photographer. If I'm going to curate Ansel Adams' work, what is it about Ansel Adams' work that I'm going to show as curator?
And that's the curatorial problem.
That's your curatorial problem.
But then say if you have a group exhibition, it becomes So if you have a group exhibition, how would you like express the curatorial problem?
And this is why I got that recognition. My second proposal, my revised, overhauled, I call it, proposal, was questioning the Southeast Asian integration.
All right.
Because the ASEAN integration would give the Philippines and the other host countries, other member countries, an economic border. We're now going to be a sort of EU.
Let's not say that.
For economics, at least.
Totally. Not even.
For economics, that's the quote-unquote idea or principle behind it. I know technically
all right, so for everybody in Europe, we're not going to have a single currency. It just means we're getting rid of tariffs between our borders.
Yeah, easier trade and whatnot. But
I just don't want people to get the wrong idea, because we do have European listeners that are like, oh, don't do the euro thing. Or we might have people on the other side of the fence, like, yes, have a single currency.
But going back,
and you should have absolutely laissez-faire, like labor practice, open your borders. But like, no, it's going to be easier to get work abroad, but it doesn't mean that we are entitled to work in other parts of the country, in other parts of Asia, Southeast Asia. Either way.
At least for me, I just want to travel easier across Southeast Asia. But we already have
that, man. We have like visa-free entry.
Yeah, I know. But like,
here.
I mean, not Southeast Asia. Asia, like But it's not gonna happen.
But then who are
anyway,
the
going
ASEAN
back,
member states, though? I mean, the ASEAN member states. We have...
So there's Myanmar, Vietnam.
Visa-free.
Singapore.
Visa-free.
Malaysia, Indonesia, ourselves.
Visa-free. Brunei, visa-free.
Yeah. Yeah. So
ASEAN integration isn't
anyway.
going to mean shit if we want to travel to Japan. You know?
Yeah.
Like, we still have
unless
to get a
they're gonna
visa.
be, because if we're gonna count ASEAN plus 3 or the ASEAN plus 6, it's a thing actually. Which
Yeah, it is. But
it's weird. It's ASEAN plus 3 and ASEAN plus 6. I find the name funny. Anyway, going back. For my example of the curatorial problem with regard to ASEAN integration, is I posited certain questions with regard to the economics. Will that economics affect the identity of the member countries? Meaning, with the free trade and easier to get jobs across the ASEAN nations, would that, in a level, would that change, evolve, replace personalities or identities? That's one curatorial problem. Second curatorial problem is the promised economic boom or economic improvements trickle down to those who necessarily would need them. And I forgot the fourth point, but my final point was, my third point, but my final point was, to plain and simply put it, is the Southeast Asian, is ASEAN ready to become for this? Is the ASEAN ready for this region or for this integration? So, how will I fix that curatorial problem through an exhibition? I titled my proposal, 6 Countries in Search of a Region.
Ooh, what was it? that was a play.
Exactly. That's why everybody laughed. Yeah, everybody, Pirelli.
Yeah.
But everybody laughed. And they were like, funny. It's like, witty. Because, we have 6 6 member countries and in search for region. So, I presented a work that, coming from Singapore, showing how everybody in Singapore is miserable. How loneliness goes by one. Then I show the work from, because that in its core tells about, this is Singapore, the biggest economic superpower, the biggest economy in ASEAN. Are the nation, if the prosperity eventually comes in, are all of us going to be like Singapore?
Oh, by the way, the 6 characters in search of an author was Pirandello.
Oh, Pirandelli, not Pirelli, sorry. Pirelli is a calendar.
Yeah, Luigi Pirandello.
Yeah. Another work I presented was a local work by a photographer friend of mine who deals with topographics and man-altered landscapes. But his catch was that it's all dark and everything is dark, bleak, and it's counterflow or commentary against the vibrancy of the Philippines and the hustle and bustle. Like, most of the photographs he made were from the provinces. None of them are bleak and dark. So it shows that the Philippine identity, or how we want to present ourselves to the world, is not necessarily what we are showing. Perhaps there are some things that ASEAN don't know about the respective countries. Another work I presented was Malaysia. Are you seeing now how the entire exhibition is shaping?
Yeah.
It comes to fruition?
So I guess the questions.
Each work,
go ahead.
Yeah, each work has their own voice or say, but how the works integrate with each other in an exhibition is what the role of the curator is, or the curatorial, how the curating process happens.
All right. So, but then the question still stands, though. What about the agency of the artist? So, if I were an artist that shows happy Singaporeans and vibrant Filipinos in an environment where there is sort of this idea of multiculturalism and integration with other parts of the world, like a totally non-bleak outlook on this idea of ASEAN integration, what are my chances of getting into the exhibit by the curator that has this vision?
Yeah, for me personally, I actually put that in my points to add to points of research or points of improvement in my proposal, to add a counterpoint to some of the things that I addressed.
Yeah. So, but
because
then
what you want,
go
because my main goal for that proposal was to show, was to have a critical look about this ASEAN integration. And if I'm just to show, like, you have to show all the sides, all dimensions, or many dimensions as much as possible with regard to how people are reacting to it on a photographic level, and at the same time, of course, to address all the issues possible. Kaya in my points of improvement, I wanted to put a photographic project regarding the West Philippine Sea, South China Sea.
But then,
You see,
yeah,
or
but then
something
like,
positive about the ASEAN integration.
yeah, but then like, but then that's assuming that, that's like, how do you temper the curator with an agenda?
No. That's where the. What do you mean with agenda? Do you mean agenda with the? Do you mean agenda or stance or a certain? What's the term? Where's my notebook? Oh, what's the term? They were using a term to describe that.
Yeah, because
you have to have a say. The curator still needs to have a thesis statement.
Yeah, but then because I would assume that the curator is the hurdle before the artist can get his or her work shown.
Not nowadays, not really. But if for the purposes of discussion, we should let's assume that yes.
Yeah. So given that, is it that the good curator is the one that allows the artist? Because if you have a curatorial vision, necessarily the artists that don't match that vision will be excluded.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean that their work is crap. That doesn't mean it doesn't fit your vision. Like for that project, I didn't get any diaristic photographers, like or those who are working with intimate and personal stories, because I'm looking at it at a macro level. I'm looking for those working in cities or telling about urban spaces or economic experiences. Those are the types of works I need for that specific project. Like one of my classmates in the workshop was from Baguio, and his curatorial problem was, it was simple. It was just archiving archiving northern Luzon or mountain art in northern Luzon, the mountain culture. So his problem actually is more of a technical one, technical/logistical one than a conceptual.
But then wouldn't that just be I guess
that's still part of the work of a curator.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing. I may live in Baguio, but say I could be Asian minimalist designer. So that's not part of the mountain culture. You get?
So what is a curator?
Where's my notebook?
Because your Baguio classmate sounds like an archivist to me.
No, that's part of it. Curator is also a project archivist, project manager, and coordinator. Sometimes politician. Because I'm gonna move away from the mic, so let's not. But it's also the role of the curator to make sure, and like the archivist will be under the curator. You get what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like archivist will be the one doing the nitty gritty, but who would select what would be archived?
Okay, all right, yeah. Because now that I think about it, like the curator is a very broad term.
Yeah, it is.
It's
especially
like
nowadays, everybody with a Tumblr account or a Pinterest is a curator. Heck, Steam calls their stuff Steam curators.
Yeah.
Like pretty much the broadest term of a curator nowadays is just someone who compiles something. But
just thinking about it, right? Like a curator, it's really broad, like history museums and stuff. That's all curatorial work.
Yeah, those are still curatorial work, but most historical museums are interested in restoration of those works. Perhaps their curatorial problem is, how are we going to be able to preserve and show these works for future generations? Because of course, funds are limited. Not all the works can be salvaged. So what makes this particular type or piece better to be preserved than this other piece. You get?
Yeah. Although, like, I don't know.
Go ahead.
No, it like literally just occurred to me that the word curator is like a lot broader than in this context.
Yeah, why do you think in day one I was complaining about it? Because I didn't particularly understood it. But come day 2 of the workshop, I was like, oh, when the Japanese curator finally had her talk. She's the curator of the Museum of Modern Art in Tokyo. When I was listening to her lecture, actually, it all made sense to me.
All right. Yeah.
Because the proposal she presented was how humanity across the world deals with time. Jesus Christ. Like, I was looking at the work and the research that came through it. Like, that's why during the Q&A I asked her, which came first to you? Was it the research or the idea? She said the idea. Like, I wonder, because she travels a lot, being the curator, to look for work and whatnot, and go to talks and workshops and whatever. When she went to, I think, Chicago, and then flew to Tokyo, when she was in Tokyo, she says, I wonder what's happening in Chicago right at this very moment, if there's another me in there. Like, how we interact with time. That's what she was fascinated about. And from there, she looked for, she questioned things about time, like sameness of time between here and a different place. Those who are trying to forget about time, especially in politics where politicians don't want to, are ignoring. No, I'm serious. One of the works was, a bunch of, like, political paperwork which are emptied out.
Yeah,
and other about, like, the exhibition showed different relationships with time. One was she also there was also an installation about somebody's product of labor, like laborer, and then as in someone who picks berries.
Yeah.
So instead of berries, what's shown when the installation was the total amount of weight that said artist was able to pick during the 3-month residency that artist had. But in that residency, he just spent it working on a berry field.
Do the same principles that apply to being a curator for like fine arts, etc. Does this apply? Do they also apply to, say, like a natural history museum, to a library of old books or something?
Yes, that's why they were insisting it's more of a curatorial practice, because I was telling them I'm more focused with photography and that's where I want to concentrate. And that they said was, well, it's kind of near with regard to art, but at the end of the day, it's the curatorial practice that we are interested in.
Yeah.
So one of the observers is a private, like, he services private, he's an independent curator, and most of his services are geared towards collectors. He has curated stamps, coins, mostly books and paintings, but his weirdest, what he said, was stamps.
How would you curate stamps? Like, what is a curatorial problem for stamps other than like putting them
the preservation,
other than displaying them in order of release?
Yeah, era. You have to consider the like, what particular era is this, and what does it say about that particular era? Say, he was telling me that he, aside from arranging them by release, like the Spanish period, American period, Japanese period, how each of them should be grouped together, and what are the particular nuances of each stamp. He became a researcher there, aside from just being a curator.
Yeah, this is kind of blowing my mind right now, because like I've always understood the role of the curator not being something to do with not being like substantive, but rather more formal. Like, what would be the best way to present something That is to say, they interpret the thesis of the thing, as opposed to having their own thesis interplaying with the thesis of the thing.
Well, don't be surprised, because this is relatively a new movement with regard to the curatorial practice, because this is a response now to the modern view of curation, a modernist view of curation, or with regard, wait, let me recall my notes. This is a response to the modernist economic conditions. I forgot. Basta, it's really new because of economics, curation, economic conditions of the world and the internet. There is no need for curators anymore. So who took up the mantle? Other artists as well.
Yeah.
And other artists have a particular stance or expression or meaning that they want, or urgencies or philosophies they have. So in their curatorial practice, they employed those things, and that was what became of curation. The rise of the artist curator, or what one of the Filipino curators called it, the creator curator.
That's really interesting, and something that I have a great deal of skepticism about.
What do you mean?
Because again, it takes
Because
away because it takes away the agency of the artist in a way.
I don't think it takes away the agency of the artist. The artist could still do whatever the hell he wants. It's just that the work of the artist now becomes part of, what do you call this? If it's, say, again, with a group exhibit, the work of the artist still stands on its own, but it becomes part of the bigger statement.
Yeah, again, like a cog in the machine.
Okay,
I mean, that's something that I don't know.
It doesn't limit what the artist is capable of, or what the artist can do.
It just puts
the artist.
It just puts the
artist in a bigger perspective.
It puts the artist in the context of another's thesis statement.
Yeah, which I don't know how others would accept it.
Well, yeah, I don't know.
The concept is, I think, probably around just for 10, 15 years.
Okay.
Probably not even.
But yeah, I mean, it's interesting though, like to see how the profession has evolved, because that's a thing that happens, I guess.
With the response with the internet, pretty much that. Because again, anybody with a Pinterest, a Tumblr, can be a curator. Heck, track hashtags on Instagram, that's curation.
Doesn't that mean though that no, not what does that mean? Doesn't that put it doesn't that put the idea of a curator in the same risk that computer technician, bringing it back? The same problem that a computer technician has, because the term computer technician to describe a profession is so broad that it has become virtually meaningless.
My response to that, I guess, with my limited knowledge of the curatorial practice, is that to an extent, that's the reason why the evolution towards the artist curator happened. Because as much as algorithms can be made, right? Say, what I mean is, I could input stuff on the computer, and again, with Tumblr, with Instagram, I could put a hashtag, I could have a bevy of works that I could select. But if you're looking for something specific, and you need to show different points of view and variety of that particular work, you still need a curator for that. As much as, like a computer technician, as much as we can fix computers ourselves, there are times that we just need to bring it to someone who knows.
What I mean by computer technician is that a computer technician can pretty much be fucking anything, right? Like, I'm a computer technician and they'll have you try to set up a Samba server. Or I'm a computer technician and they'll try to have you, set up a Cisco box, right?
Okay. I get it.
Yeah.
There are times that the curator has to do it himself, herself, especially with research. But if you could have a reason,
ganito. We know that there's a difference between a gamer. We know that there's a difference between a vast difference between a gamer that plays an RTS, a gamer that plays an FPS. Hell, there's a big difference between Counter-Strike style first-person shooters and Call of Duty style first-person shooters, right? These are vastly different things. Yet they're all clumped into this thing called gamer, which has become the catch-all term. Like, I don't know if you see where I'm going with this.
No. It's still not a catch-all term in regard to curation. If you're gonna go by that metaphor, well, I'm gonna go with a different one. The curator is your producer.
Okay.
Your artists are your artists. You have an executive producer which funds the everything. Then you have your directors. Those, because even if you're the curator, you could use sometimes those, especially with big budgets, say in New York and Paris, you have somebody who plans the entire floor or the exhibit space. Like as the curator, you will just say your idea. Okay, I want to put this wall is too big. What do you think we could do with this wall? But this is the point. I think we should show, say, in certain exhibitions with regard to photography, the choices of how large the print is with, of course, with the artist. But the curator could go ahead and suggest that, no, we should make it bigger. Or, you know what? Instead of making it that size, what if we panorama it? And then you consult to somebody who knows the form. Like, where do you think we could have this stage? So it's still a very collaborative effort.
God, we've been going for 40 minutes on, like, the curatorial process.
Yeah, because you got fascinated and it's still fresh in my mind.
This should be a Bodega Nights.
We probably should.
Yeah, this is totally going to be a Bodega Nights.
Yeah, this is be a Bodega Night.